Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to give us a couple minutes before we get started as we see those participant numbers go up. Thank you again for being here. You might hear some background noise. My toddler is also in the room and might actually come and say hello at some point. So still waiting for another 30 seconds before we get started until that number holds steady. It's still going up for now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. All right, it looks like we are holding steady at 70 participants. Apologies for being a little distracted. Thank you, Isla. My toddler is in the room. You see her running around in the background. We're trying to keep her entertained. That's my whole life now, just entertaining a 19-month-old. Anyways, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tammy Strauss. I am the principal of Newton South High School. Thank you again for being here. We're almost at 80 participants, which is fantastic. We appreciate your time. This is an informational session, as you all know. All of the key people who need to be here are here. We have a lot of good information for you, but please know that it is a ton of information. So if you have follow-up questions, we are happy to help answer any of those questions. If a question does pop up while we are speaking, feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and we will either answer it live or answer it as the evening goes on. For now, I will turn it over to my vice principal to introduce himself and kind of get us started. Thank you again.
Hi, everybody. Jason Williams, Vice Principal here at Newton South. It's good to see all of you, and I'm really happy that you folks are here this evening. We'll talk about course registration, MCAS, and a couple of other things as well. But for now, I just want to introduce a couple of other people, first being Will Adams of the PTSO.
Get myself off mute. Thank you very much, Jason. Welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. As Jason said, I'm Will Adams. I am a co-president of our PTSO. This is my second and final year. Our other co-president, Maggie Schmidt, I don't think is here tonight. Between the two of us, we have a child in each grade, so we decided to divide and conquer, and she's doing our ninth and senior get-togethers, and I have been here for the junior and sophomore. So thank you, everyone. So now that you have a sophomore, most of you, if not all of you, this is your second year here at South. So you may have heard me speak before and been to some PTSO events. But for the sake of anyone who might be new to all of this, just to explain a little bit about our role as PTSO co-presidents. Really, our first and foremost responsibility is just to help build community and sustain the great community that we have here at South. In doing that, we really try to communicate with all of you on a weekly basis. That's mostly through our Sunday newsletters. If you aren't receiving the newsletter, and I would be mystified if any of you here aren't, I think Jason has put up, Jason, do you have a slide that can go up that Maggie might have shared with you? We'll have the link to our website. If you're not signed up for the newsletter, just go to our website, and then you can, down the right-hand side, sign yourself up for our weekly newsletter and get all the good information. Secondly, we're really a clearinghouse for information. We take what we hear from all of you. We love your feedback and make sure it gets to the right set of ears in the school, be it teachers or administration. And in the reverse, we meet with Principal Strauss every 2 weeks. We're on the school council. We take all the information we get and share it with you when we think it's appropriate. And we try to get everyone all the answers you're looking for. So please feel free to reach out to us at co-presidents@newtonsouthptso.org. We have about a dozen volunteer committees here at South that cover hospitality, some of our holiday events, parents working on website maintenance and helping with communications in our parent class reps. So throughout the year, there's something to do for everybody, whether it's, a one-off thing that just gives you an excuse to get into the school and see the kids, in their environment, or something that you might be comfortable doing at home and pitching in. We welcome all the help we can get. You will see on our website, there is a page that has a sign up genius and sort of a brief description of all the different opportunities available to our parents and guardians throughout the year. We do get all of our money through our dues campaign. That is still live, although most of that is we take in that money up front in the beginning of the school year. Thank you for everyone who's already donated. If you haven't, it is never too late. So we really appreciate your help there. And I would say, just as we enter this second half of the year and finish up, be on the lookout for any opportunities that might come across in the newsletter. If there's an event that we might need help for, we'll make sure to ask, and we'd love to see everybody add something over the course of the next few years. Thank you very much. And I will pass it on to Star Lou.
Thank you, Will. Jason, could you please show the PowerPoint? Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Star Lou. I think I probably met some of you last year at 9th grade back to school night or 9th grade parent night as well. So I apologize if some information is repetitive, but I want to give you a forecast that I'm going to have a video shown in this PowerPoint. So please stay tuned. So for those who don't know me, my name is Star Lou. I wear many hats. One is that I'm coordinating the Newton Public School Global Program in Newton South and Newton North. I'm also coordinating the Beijing Jingshan Exchange Program. In addition, I teach 2 classes at Newton North. Next slide, please, Jason. So to talk about the international travel program, as your child is going to become a junior, I know there are many heavy lifting classes in their schedule. And in addition, they are also, they have plenty of opportunity regarding what language they're taking. And even in social studies department, they have chances to go on international travel program that will enrich their lives. Next slide, please. So if you want to find more information, please Google International Travel Program Newton. That will lead you to the website. Next slide, please, Jason. So that's what it looks like. And for Newton South, this year we don't have, this school year we don't have Latvia trip, but it may come back next year. But I want to give a shout out to 2 new programs. One is the Ghana Exchange that is going to come next year. And also, Jason, please. There's a new trip for sustainability for students for the coming year. So please stay tuned. The teachers will send out information for registration. Next slide, please, Jason. So this is what it looks like on the website for each trip, and any trip will have a contact information. You may reach out to the teacher or reach out to me if you have any questions. Next slide, please, Jason. So if your family feels hesitant to sign up trip because of financial situations, we have a specific financial aid program just for the international travel program. It's called the Jennifer Price Global Education Leadership Fund. It is 501c3 organization, so all the donations are tax deductible. Next slide, please, Jason. So to come up on March 28th, Thursday, we are going to have a community building activity. Usually we would offer, we would host a fundraising event every year, but this year we are actually going to, the GALF is sponsoring a community building program where you're going to hear a lot of stories from our exchange students and families, as well as exchange leaders. So you may scan the QR code here on the screen, and it's only $20 per person to reserve a seat, and dinner is included. Next slide, please, Jason. So here is a video from our beloved Newton South student, Kevin Yang. Thank you, Jason.
Hello, I'm Kevin Yang. I'm class of 2024, and I was one of the recipients of the GELF grant for the French trip for Newton South High School. And I would like to say that this GELF grant was an opportunity enabler. It allowed me to take this trip that I would otherwise not have been able to do. And I think fondly upon this trip, especially with my interactions with the Parisians and just being with them and hanging out with them as teenagers in a big city. I remember playing basketball with them, going to my correspondence basketball practice, and bonding with other Parisians over the sport of basketball. And to be honest, I didn't really understand what they were all saying during practice or what all the drills meant. But just being able to play basketball, shooting hoops, and bonding over that was an experience that otherwise I would not have been able to feel without this Guelph grant. So I'd like to say that with further donations towards Guelph, you're helping students and future generations to become world leaders and to be immersed in other cultures, giving them a more nuanced perspective on the world.
Thank you, Jason. Next slide, please. So in order to find more information about Guelph, the link is directly under the international travel program on our website. Next, please. So big shout out to some of our Newton South parents who are on the Guelph board. We have 4 members from our Newton South community: David Faveza, Sunday Hong, Jun Liu, and Carrie Michael. And they are working above and beyond to help our fundraiser from last year. So these are the pictures from last year's fundraiser. Next slide, please, Jason. This is our principal, Strauss, and volunteers who were helping us out during our fun event. Next slide, please, Jason. So I want to introduce another Newton South parent. On the right is Laura Tavares, who graciously allowed us to use the Wilson Chapel to host this beautiful event. And also a shout out to Ms. Suzanne Murphy-Ferguson, the World Language Department Chair, who is mentoring this program when it was very new 10 years ago. Next slide, please. So if you want to volunteer or see what an international program is like, and to see how you could involve in the Newton South student lives, here are some ways you could become a board members, and or if you want to be just a volunteer for any of the subcommittees here, I just listed all of them here. Or if you are interested in learning more, please reach out to me. Next, please. So this is my email, LEWY, and I work, Will Adams, our MP, Newton South PTO co-president, has helped me tremendously. So when you volunteer for Guelph or volunteer for PTSO, just know that we have the same goal, that we are trying to build a very nicely and closely knit community for Newton South. Thank you, everybody. Now I'm going to introduce Dave Kershaw, who is our guidance counselor at Newton South.
Good evening, all, and welcome. Thanks for being here. My name is Dave Kershaw. I am one of the counselors at South, in Goodwin House specifically. I've been at South for 17 years. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. I'm actually here tonight pinch hitting a bit. Our guidance department chair, Dan Rubin, has been sidelined by a skiing accident, and he always takes a great deal of pride in being here and joining you and talking about all this stuff tonight. So I am taking, a bunch of us are kind of taking that role on, and we're thrilled to be with you. I'll be back in a little bit to talk about registration. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Chris Hardiman.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Hardiman. I've been a school counselor at Newton South for 13 years, and happy to be here tonight as well. As Jason had mentioned, just a brief overview of the themes that we're going to address tonight. Course registration planning, we're actually in the midst of it right now. MCAS, you'll be hearing a lot about that because 10th grade is the big MCAS year for ELA and math. And then we'll do a little glimpse into the future for a little discussion on post-secondary planning, the PSAT, and some class events. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for now to Jason Williams.
Hi, everybody. Well, back again. So first, we'll talk about course registration for a little bit and go through those phases. So I pressed the button on the wrong screen. The program of studies came out last week or so, and I sent out it's more about that. And this is an overview of the process that's on our course registration website now. So we are close to the end of the teacher rec process now. So teachers are finishing up their recommendations. They'll be done by next Monday, the end of the day next Monday, March 11th. And they'll be putting in recommendations for core classes. And then starting on March 12th, so next Tuesday, a week from today, actually, students will be able to start requesting additional courses in Aspen that don't require a teacher recommendation, so electives and other courses of the like. So, and they'll also be able to see student recommendations, sorry, not student recommendations, teacher recommendations as well. There'll be a period where counselors will review course requests. So they'll be meeting with every student to the best of their ability. And we wrap it all up on April 4th when we verify and make sure that everybody has all the things that they want. So going into a little bit more detail about some of these things. So actually, I feel like I said pretty much said all of this already, but for the most part, the big thing is starting next Tuesday, students will see their core course selections pre-populated. So they'll be able to view what they've been recommended for. And as caregivers, you'll also be able to view that. We have instructions for both on our course registration website. And then, as I mentioned, students will be able to select their electives in Aspen, and that will go until March 20th at the end of the night. For yeah, the only other big thing really is for verification. It'll be a little bit and I'm gonna hand it to Dave right after this, but it'll be a little bit different in that normally we like finally verify on like a Monday, but this year since we're ending on a Thursday, we'll have a Monday period to do some verification as needed, and then have a few days to just make sure we tie everything together. But I'll hand it over to Dave at this point to I believe to continue talking about this in the next couple of slides afterward.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so again, welcome. This is a really exciting time. We're almost 3/4 of the way through sophomore year for all of the families joining us tonight, and that sort of marks pretty close to the halfway point and entering into junior year, which I know can have a lot of, connotations with it, a lot of stress. The junior year is the most important, the biggest thing. And really, I like to look at the positives of it in that you are halfway through the journey. You've discovered more about yourself as a learner. You are feeling more confident in the way that South operates. And I think was just more confident overall in your approach to academics. So with that, I think I go into that in working with individual students to choose course selections for junior year with a lot of excitement because things open up a little bit in terms of choice and things like that they have to take. So that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tonight. And we have essentially, as Jason mentioned, a timeline. He just showed the slide prior. The window is sort of opening now where students have had conversations with teachers. They're then gonna be able to plug in selections that they've chosen through reviewing our course catalog, through having those thoughtful conversations with teachers, and then it's going to ultimately culminate in verification day, which is the day that we set aside where we'll go through and have students take one final look and have a brief discussion again with teachers if needed. So they'll see all teachers on that day, and then at the end of the day, we sort of close that window where it's then getting handed over, and we're going to start to build the schedule for next year, which obviously is a long process and takes quite a while to get all those students scheduled. So some of the things to consider as hopefully at the kitchen table, your students having conversations with you about this process is graduation requirements, right? So students are required to have 243 credits to graduate. If you are taking a full complement of courses at Newton South, which most every student is and are required to do, it's really not a lot. You don't have to put a lot of thought into hitting that exact 243 credits. Students are actually well over that by the time they're done by taking a full complement of courses here. But it is something to keep in mind. They should, as far as electives go, and so within that 243 credits, that's the broad range that you need, but then there's distribution credits within that. So each discipline, you need so many in math, so many in science, so many in the arts, etc. So that's all listed in the program of study. So we're also the one-on-one meetings counselors are having with students are discussing just that and have they hit those marks. So by junior year, if you haven't taken an elective, it's a good idea to start thinking about taking some electives to fulfill some of those distribution requirements in the arts, etc. So something to really consider. Making sure that you do have a proper balance is really, really important. It's always been important, but especially as courses get, there's more rigor involved as you get towards junior year and the breadth and scope kind of widens. It's important to make sure that you're leaving enough time for, just for for self-care and also to make sure you're balancing your homework load, et cetera. And so as you're thinking about your coursework, are you leaving time during the day? You know, we have a lot of students, because it's junior year, really want to raise the bar and a lot of times want to have a completely full complement of courses and a full schedule, which means really no breathing time during the day. So we really recommend that students are thoughtful about that and at least leave a little bit of time during the day to decompress, to get something to eat, to be able to maybe work on some homework if they have a really busy outside schedule after school, things like that. So that's something that we talk about as well. When you are selecting courses, alternatives are really important. So we can't, unfortunately, give every student every class that they want. It's just space is an issue, and that's something that is really challenging. We try really hard, but it's really important for students to choose secondary electives, secondary choices when they're picking electives. So something that's going to be a direct alternate. So if I don't get this art class, I would like this. And then they also can list general alternates, which is sort of will sit there that if we're not able to fit any of the classes that didn't work for them in elective wise, we can roll to that general elective, meaning I would like this. If these others don't fit, I'm happy with this class. So that's sort of a general alternate. Make sure they're focusing on areas of interest. They certainly don't have to major at this point by any means, but something to keep in mind. We talked about balance as well. Strength of schedule is important. Obviously, entering junior year, you want to increase the rigor of your classes, where possible, and it doesn't have to be across the board, but certainly stretch if you're someone who's had a lot of academic success and you've had a pretty steady flow. Think about talking to teachers about stretching in some areas. Maybe adding an honors course, and if you've had a lot of success in a certain discipline, and sort of changing the rigor, changing the level a little bit, so you can show that progression if you are interested in attending college or university after you graduate. We talked about planning time for joy, really important. Another aspect that doesn't get talked about enough is, and I'm sure you may hear this at home, is the pressures that come from students comparing what schedules they're taking and how much, how rigorous the courses they're taking. We hear a lot of that. I know as counselors that my friends are taking 6 or 7 AP courses, across their career. How can I get there? I feel like I'm behind. We really try to have students turn inward during those times and look at what they've done, celebrate who they are, not compare themselves to others. The journey is unique to each individual, and it's really important that they focus on that and just trust in the work that they're doing, and that they're going to get somewhere great. So that's just, we really try. I know it's easier said than done, but there's a lot of peer pressure that comes with comparing yourself to others, especially in that process. So I think that's pretty. Jason, you can switch to the next slide for me. We talked about strength of schedule, and how that can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. Again, going too heavy can really, we see kids all the time just really get overloaded and overwhelmed, quite frankly, because they're not willing to give up outside activities, which they shouldn't. So they're trying to balance all these outside activities that they've always had, in addition to having increased the rigor, as I just talked about. And so that's like, how many plates can you keep spinning? So that's something that always be reflective of, especially as parents, to be mindful of if you're seeing patterns change, less sleep, things like that, really to be, checking in on that. So I think next slide, Jason, is the next slide. Yeah, okay. So I think overall that is pretty much, again, a lot of it in a really fast nutshell, but please know and trust that we are meeting with each individual student starting the week of, Jason said next week, starting Tuesday, but specifically for 10th graders, we will be meeting one-on-one. I had it written. Sec.
I think it's the week of the 18th.
Yes, sorry. So they start the week of the 18th. So we just stagger them, but they'll start the week of the 18th. And those one-on-one conversations will be really comprehensive and thoughtful. Have they checked the boxes as far as their course load, credits, things like that. So we'll cover all those bases, but please feel free to reach out in the meantime if you have individual questions as well. And next, we're going to kick it to Jason for MCAS.
All right. So for MCAS, as was already mentioned, this is the big year for MCAS. So last year, most students would have most likely taken the physics MCAS. There might have been some cases where bio was taken instead. But this year, there's 2 big MCAS exams, one being the ELA, which is actually just in 3 weeks, and the other one being math, which is going to be in May. So for ELA, it's generally the Tuesday and the Wednesday. For ELA, it is Tuesday, March 26th and Wednesday, March 27th. The March 26th session on the Tuesday is a relatively long session compared to all the others. So it's I think that Desi says about like 2.5 hours is how long it will take the average student, but we give about 3 to 4 just to make sure folks have time to, be thoughtful about their essays and not have to feel the pressure of coming back to school. Not coming back to school, but starting classes up again. And then we also do it on Wednesday, March 27th. We have a few days for makeup. We wrap everything up. And then we do math in May. And there's one day where students are not allowed to use a calculator pending barring an accommodation that lets you. And then there is a second session where students are able to use a calculator for that test. So just being aware of those testing dates. As if your student was a 9th grader in school last year, you would have also witnessed the schedule changing really the 3 times when we did those big tests. So where only test takers are in the building in the morning. So this time you folks are up. So they'll be in the building and they'll take their buses as they normally would in the morning. And then all the other students will come to school later in the day, and we'll do a reduced class schedule. So keep an eye out for future weekly updates. So I'll start to put the schedule in those updates. So just make sure you have those marked for when the buses come and go. You'll get information about that there. And then the week of the weekly update, the week of the MCAS, you'll see a much longer update about the details of like what to be aware of if you're a test taker, what to be aware of otherwise, so on and so forth. Just to answer the question in the Q&A out loud, the MCAS math again is on May 21st and May 22nd. So it's that 3rd week of May. It's actually after the 2 weeks of AP exams. Just to give you an idea of those dates. There are some other resources here as well, so that are worth noting, and I can link some of these things in. In fact, I'm gonna come out of this presentation for a second just to show you one of them, but there are some, see how well the sliding over thing works. Here we go. So there are some resources on this website. This is just the English ones in particular. So if I can open the chat up again, do that really quick. So this has, this website has, I'll zoom this in, the different resources for English. You can always tab over for math and science as well. The main thing that most people will probably be concerned about is the computer-based practice test that's here. So this is something that might be worth going through with your student, having your student go through if it ever decides to load. There we go. And it essentially emulates what it would look like on the student's computer. There also is a way to access the practice tests from a student's Chromebook as well if you attempt to log in like through a certain panel, and you can see some of those same types of things here. So this is essentially how this would look for a student. So I'll show you, that's that one, for example, and then for the math one, just to show you really quick. One thing for the math one in particular that will be relevant is just making sure, let's just do session 2 as a quick example, that students know how to use, let's just find the question where that happens. So equation editors like this one will appear in some questions. So just being mindful of that and making sure that students are aware of how that works and all the symbols and everything is and how all that stuff works. Math teachers generally would be going over this in their classes as well, just to make sure that students are aware of these structures and how they work. But it's just really important to just be aware that they exist, and it might be worth just doing one quick practice run and then having some questions that you could definitely field that students can field to their teachers for that test. But those practice tests are there. I do recommend looking them over at least once. And then there's also other release test items as well. But those are some things I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of as they're getting ready for that. And I believe I think I'm handing it back to Chris for this next slide for what's on the horizon.
Here we go. Thanks, Jason. So at this point, as we near the end of 10th grade, and as your students not too far in the future go off into 11th grade, developmentally, there is an increased responsibility, maturity, starting to think about the future a little bit more than we would expect, certainly in 9th or even the beginning of 10th. But as a school, we don't dive kind of headfirst in with the students for college planning in 10th grade. We know every family's different, every student's different. There are some students that want to do some exploration early, and I'll get into that in a minute, mentioning our web platform SCORE. But there are other options that we always want to encourage students to think about too, including gap years, getting into trades, 4-year college, 2-year college. So we really do cover all bases with students when we talk about the post-high school options and starting to think about that. With that, there is a college and career website that has just chock full of information. Kathy Sabet is our college and career counselor. She's wonderful. She doesn't just give college advice or help families and students with college planning, but she also has a lot of information about careers, jobs, internships, volunteer opportunities. And actually, I'll give a little plug for a upcoming event, Career Pathways event, which will be on March 27th at South from 6:30 to 8. Examples of some of the vendors that will be coming that night are the Mass Dental Society, Bright Horizons Childcare, Mass Bay Community College, Sheridan Hotel, Coastal EMS, US Marines. Those are just some of the examples. There are probably a dozen more. Just to give you an example of the types of the variety of careers and information that will be on hand that night, representatives from all those vendors and career pathways. So that's a really, really good night, I think, for a 10th grader and 11th grader to attend with their families. With mentioning SCORE, SCORE is a web-based platform. We used to use anyone have older siblings, we used to use a system called Naviance. We have moved to SCORE, which is a much cleaner and user-friendly platform where students can access anything from personality tests, career interest inventories, and then in junior year, especially college search engines and lots of information on colleges that students can really access at any time. In fact, some of you may have already heard from your students that they received an invitation to SCORE. I believe our guidance director, Dan Rubin, sent a link to all sophomores back in September. And again, we haven't fully promoted it with sophomores, partly because we've been spending a lot of time with juniors on it. We've only been using the system for a year. But again, some 10th graders are at very different places than others. And so we want students to feel the liberty to kind of explore as they see fit. If students did not get the initial invite, I think SCORE has a way that I think every month they resend an invite to a student to sign up. But students can also see their school counselor, and we can always help them to access the web platform. In terms of testing, I know that some sophomores do take the PSAT. It's not the majority of the sophomore class. In fact, sometimes we get panicked phone calls from parents saying, was my 10th grader supposed to take the PSAT? Just be aware that it really is a test normed for 11th graders. I know some 10th graders feel like it's good practice, but it is designed for 11th graders. So just a preview into that. The testing is in October. On a Saturday, it takes place at South. It is fully digital test now, along with the SAT. And results of the PSAT are only shared with students and families and the counselors. It's not something shared with colleges. It's a great practice test. Registration will be in September, and we do have a PSAT coordinator, and they will be sending, you'll be getting a lot more information on the PSAT in September. And then the final piece about the testing accommodations, if a student regularly accesses accommodations through either an IEP, a 504 plan, or an ICAP, the most common accommodation actually is extended time. But if that is the case for your student, parents can contact a special ed liaison for an IEP or your child's counselor for a 504. And they can do that now. I mean, you can do that now or in the fall. And there is a process where we have to apply with the College Board or the ACT company if your child is taking an ACT. And decisions are made solely by the testing agencies. Newton South does not have a say in whether a student does get approved for accommodations or not, but we do file the accommodation requests based on what the student regularly accesses in their classes at South. So that kind of, as David said, this is kind of throwing lots of information at you. And as Tammy Strauss said, don't hesitate to follow up with any of us with your own child's counselor if you have further questions, because it is a lot of information coming at once. And I think we have one piece left that Jason's going to take care of with the end of the year events for the class.
Yep, and I'll speak to this quickly. There's two things coming up. One, there is a dance for the class of 2026 on April 6th. So it's like actually a month from now. And then in June 17th to 21st, we have our end of year experiences, events, exams, what have you. Those are going to be special schedules that we'll talk about a little bit later. Not talk about a little bit. We'll reveal those a little bit later once we're ready to do so. But just be aware that that week is a week where courses will begin to wrap up. But I'll hand it back to Tammy at this point.
Awesome, thank you. So I know Chris reiterated what I said in the beginning. I know we threw a lot of information at you. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now. I know we had a few come in and they were all answered. I see a couple more coming in now. What will schedules be like June 24th to the 26th? And with all the information shared here tonight, be sent to ours. We will let you know what schedules are going to look like June 24th to 26th, that time, because it is after, not including June 24th, but the 25th and the 26th, because it is after the 5 snow days. In terms of attendance, it will follow the same structure as we did for our days over February vacation. The exact schedule and what that will look like will be sent out at a later date. Jason, we've been recording this, right? Yes. So we typically, yes, this night is recorded. So all of this information, Rose had a question. All of this information will be shared with you as well. Once Jason looks at the YouTube recording, cleans it all up, he will post it out. So you have all of this information at the tip of your fingers. Last day for students is June 26th.
And if I can add for the recording piece, you should expect the recording to be put on the YouTube channel by Friday. I know in some of the other groupings, there's been a lot of questions about, hey, is the recording up yet? Is it up yet? It does take a little bit of time to make sure that that is good to go, as Tammy said. So Friday is when you should expect to see it on the channel. And then I will also have a link to the recording in the next weekly update as well.
And then either Chris or Dave, Naviance versus SCORE, can you provide SCORE info to help our kids find the info? I'm not quite sure what that means, but
I would recommend, I assume you mean how can your student log in to SCORE if they lost that information? So my best advice would be to contact your individual student's counselor, or your student can also go see the counselor. That's a good way to foster that independence and taking initiative and advocating for themselves.
Chris, I would add to that they're invited to SCORE. So it's an invitation that gets sent to their email and it does expire. So sometimes they may have had that initial invite from Dan Rubin earlier in the year and it expired. So if they're struggling to get in, just touch base with your counselor. We can send another invite as well.
And Another one for Dave and Chris. Do you have any data about how many students using private college counselors at NSHS? And just wondering if this is realness. I don't actually know if we keep that data.
I don't think we keep that data there. I know that there are families that use private college counselors for all different reasons. Sometimes it's just to keep the peace in the household. I've heard that from some families, but there are plenty of families, I can tell you just from talking to our own students, that are using our great resources just at Newton South, the school counselor, and again, Kathy Sabet, our college and career counselor.
Great.
Um,
Dave, did you want to take the other
Sure.
one?
Yeah, the next one is what if my daughter would like to move up to honors in 11th grade and her teacher's not supporting it? Part of those conversations with teachers is, so they can have thoughtful discussions after they have seen your students for 3/4 of a year at this point. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes they don't agree or they're looking to stretch in that instance. We have a whole outline for what's called an override process. So that would start with, we'll start with letting the council know, but also firstly with the department chair and things like that to just have a more in-depth discussion about what they're looking for and the process for getting there if the teacher didn't agree or just didn't feel they saw enough to recommend honors. And all those situations are always thoughtful in much more the way where they're not looking to, they know what's ahead. They know the teachers who teach those courses, and that's where that usually they're recommending not going that direction because they don't want to see kids struggling in that way. So that's really where those come from. But they can definitely have thoughtful conversations with the teacher and then the department chair if they think they'd like to override.
The last question on there is why don't we have substitute teachers? From my understanding, Newton kind of got rid of substitute teachers way back in the 90s. So we have canceled class of 10th graders instead. There's a lot of reasons I think why we don't have substitute teachers, and one of them is it's very hard to find. I will say that district-wide, I believe we've increased our number of substitutes by 60-something%, so we're making progress in the right direction. Coming from multiple different school systems who had substitute teachers, if I'm being completely honest with you, at the high school level, if you cannot find someone who can actually do the content, which is very, very rare, it's not actually useful time. Our teachers typically leave work to do over Schoology for students to do. And so a substitute teacher becomes nothing but a warm body in the classroom that's not actually teaching kids. The other piece is with the new contract negotiations, there's a caveat in the contract where teachers do have the opportunity to cover other teachers, and that would be an actual class, so you're not just a warm body. But I'm happy to follow up with whoever asked that question. Your name's not there. If you need any more specifics on that. And no, we do not have school over April vacation week as long as we don't have any snow days. So here's hoping for the 50-degree weather that we're continuing to have and no crazy weather anomaly, because I don't think any of us want to be in school in April. All right. Thank you so much for being here tonight again. We appreciate all of you. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your student's counselor, dean, Mr. Williams, myself, if it's about Guelph to Star. But we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully sometime soon. And thank you again for your time. It is much appreciated. I hope everybody has a wonderful night with their families. Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks all.